What's going on? I kind of got an idea tonight about some things that I don't know. It's not really a glorious type of topic, but there's people when you find yourself on the wrong side of the law and you go to prison, you you're going to encounter some people that maybe you're used to and maybe you're not. Me, from my experience, it wasn't people that I encountered weren't really people that I was particularly used to. Not to say that I wasn't a criminal. I think criminality is an ongoing thought or a series of actions. So I don't break the law. I don't break into people's houses. I don't sell drugs. I don't do those things. It doesn't mean that I'm better than anybody else. It's just that's not the kind of lifestyle that I lead now or led before. I was doing things that were illegal, that were stealing and those kinds of things. But, it wasn't situations where I was constantly finding myself, having contact with the police or the courts or any of those things. But with all that said and out of the way, when you go to prison or jail, you're going to encounter some people. And there's it kind of runs the gamut of the spectrum of what you might think and even some things that you wouldn't think of. So, jails are places where people they're effectively pretrial detainees, so they haven't been convicted of a crime yet. They haven't maybe not pled guilty, maybe they have and they're waiting for something, but that's kind of another thing altogether. But when you go to prison, at that point the jig's up, the show's over, and you've already been convicted in some form, whether it's a plea bargain or you went to trial or whatever the case may be. But when you're in jail, it's kind of up in the air as far as what your disposition is going to be, whether you're going to go to prison, whether you're going to get out, whether you're going to get probation, whether you're going to get some kind of home incarceration or dismissal or whatever's going to happen with the case. But when you find yourself in jail and prison, you're gonna be around people that are colorful, to say the least. And some of those people are very interesting and they're very neat and they're amazingly talented. And that's the thing, is that people don't, people have this concept that when you go to prison or jail, and I know that from speaking from my experience, I know that I felt this way, that, you're more or less dead and you're counted in a census, wherever you're at, whatever facility that you're at. But I mean, you're for all intents and purposes, you're dead. You have a blank period of credit. So you're not using your credit, obviously, unless, you are, which is pretty rare. But you're not using credit cards. You're not earning money, of any real sizable income. So you're counting the census as a person, but other than that, you're really not counted. A lot of your familial relationships and your friends and those kinds of things, they kind of fall by the wayside. So you kind of have a choice, I guess, to kind of look to the outside or look more to the inside. And some people take that to the extreme. So some people, maybe they were homosexual before. Maybe they're just what's called gay for the stay. You never know. But at any rate, some people get totally wrapped up in prison lifestyle and all that kind of stuff, and they don't really look out. They don't have a future on the outside, and I think at a point, institutionalization does set in. You have people that the only thing they know is prison and jail and regimented routines and things decided for them and no choices in anything as far as your life. So, and those people, they exist and whatever. That's not me. It's not a lot of people, but I do think there's some credibility to the thought that you get institutionalized, that you become used to having those things decided for you, and that's not a good thing, because it makes you, arguably a less productive, less valuable human being. And it scars you. There's still things to this day that bother me about the time that I was in prison. But the way I look at it, I did what I did and I put myself there. So, but the people that you encounter in jails and prisons are they're gonna run the range of being addicts that are detoxing, and that's a scary sight to see. No matter what it is, whether it's cigarettes, I did that myself. I smoked. I still smoke to this day. For now, I'm going to be quitting here in the next few weeks. Hopefully and thankfully, it's kind of a mixed, cautious optimism, I guess. But people that are coming down off of psychoactive drugs, they're coming down off of withdrawing from opiates or alcohol, other drugs, spice, any drug you can think of that's a drug of abuse. People are doing it, and when they get caught, they don't let you bring your drugs with you, unless you do, and then there's ways to do that, but it's a whole other video in and of itself. So, you have people that are detoxing, that are coming down, that are withdrawing from substances. You have people that they are there and they have this one issue, but then they know maybe in the back of their mind or in the front of their mind that they have a bigger issue that's waiting to come and get them, whether it's an immigration detainer, whether it's a federal warrant for somewhere, another state's warrant that's extraditable, or maybe a very serious charge and they got arrested for DUI or something silly, and they're waiting on that to get served or that to get decided or whatever. So you have the anxiety of that. You have people that jail to them is the same as, a lot of things would be to most people. It's not that big of a deal. It's not a change. It's not anything that they're not used to. And so, they're fine with jail. You have people that are literally terrified. I was terrified the first time I went to jail, and it's not a fun place. It's not a good place for a lot of people to be. Some people like it. They deserve to be there and they want to be there, and they show that by their actions. But maybe they're innocent. Maybe the person that was arrested is innocent and they didn't do what they're accused of. They're totally innocent of it. So that does happen. And that needs to be kind of constant in people's minds. That's why we have all these rights and protections and freedoms and those kinds of things and processes, within the court system. But it's not something that should be taken lightly when someone's freedom is taken away, when their liberties are restrained, so to speak, right? So when that happens, it needs to be met with humanity, and that's the thing I think that gets lost when it comes to jail. But you're talking about when kind of being treated like you're dead, or like you're the living dead or the walking dead or whatever you want to call it. You're really kind of forsaken by a lot of people, and it's unfortunate. It happens, but it's very unfortunate. So in my time, I went to the major jail in the area in Jefferson County. I was there. I was at another jail when I was first arrested across the river in Indiana for a day. I was there for less than 24 hours. And then I was brought over to Kentucky. Had the choice to fight extradition or not. I decided not to because it wasn't going to do any good. I'm going to go ahead and face what was going to happen. So came to Louisville and was in jail here for about 2.5 months, and then I was released to home incarceration, and then came back, was brought back, final sentencing, and then because of an internal situation in the state at the time, went to another county jail in southern Kentucky, and that was the capacity was about 200 people there versus a little over 2,000 at Jefferson County. So big jump in population and types of people that you would meet at a place, given the population, the personalities there. But and then from there, I went to the state prison system with the assessment facility, and then the different prisons that I was at. So, in Jefferson County, there was a lot of people that were detoxing at the time. They had it had just happened. It wasn't going on when I had been arrested, but they had someone that had brought in several bottles of Xanax, and somehow this individual was able to get that Xanax, that substance, to a lot of different people. So they had people all over the jail that were just falling out because of they were high on Xanax. They were just totally, thudded out on that. So, and like I said, that was a very high turnover rate. You would have people that would come, they would go, they'd be there for a night or two or for weeks, and then they would just disappear one day. You'd ask, maybe you didn't, but you'd ask where Jones or Smith or whoever it was, and oh, he made bond or he made parole or his warrant got lifted or something happened and he's gone. And maybe you and Jones or Smith were really cool. You learned to kind of get along with him, and then he's gone. That's the nature of jails and prisons, is that your movement isn't really up to you. It's up to the state and the powers that be and whatever that may look like. So you had people that would be very likable, and you had people that would be very, very, very unlikable. And it fluctuated pretty wildly, pretty dramatically. From, you'd have someone that would be brought in and you would instantly have a feeling about them. And then, the thing in the jail at the time was everyone wanted to know what everyone else's case was. And it's this weird type of vigilante type justice or something. If you had a sex case, then whether it's a rape or a child sex case, then you were definitely and decidedly treated a lot different than the average inmate, the average criminal, I guess. And for better or for worse, that's just the way that it is, and that's a trend. It's a trend. It's a soft drink, not a beer. I'm gonna show it on camera. I don't want to get another copyright claim here, but it is a soft drink. I'm in a car working, but I don't drink and drive. It's not good. So, everyone was kind of everyone else's judge in that sense. It seemed like everyone else was also everyone else's lawyer, because you would have people that would, have a case or a charge. You'd have people that would say, oh, they don't have you on that case. They can't. They look at your discovery because they were lawyers, right? They would try to hype you up and try to get you to fight the case or to go this route with it or whatever, and that was just totally inappropriate. But it happened. It happens in every jail across the country. Every jail definitely, but prisons to a lesser extent. But every jail, absolutely, it happens. So, and that can be bad. And there was an individual, I don't want to, throughout this video and any other videos on the channel, I really, really don't want to name anyone specifically, so I'm not going to do that. And I also don't want to be too specific in facts that would allow someone to kind of identify a person by those facts. So, with that in mind, there was an individual that I came to know, and it shows you how things can work out. This individual had a very long history of drug manufacturing. He manufactured meth at the time, 2009, 2010. Meth was everywhere in the country, and certainly was everywhere here in Kentucky. They introduced legislation and did a lot of things to try to combat the meth, but obviously it didn't work. It could have worked better. Could have been less people making meth, but that wasn't the case. The reason why they had the laws. But this guy had a history of manufacturing methamphetamine, and it's a horrible substance. When I was an EMT, we had an in-service by the Indiana State Police, and they told us some different facts about it. That for every X amount of measure of methamphetamine that's made, there's X amount of toxic waste, literally toxic waste that's produced. You've got byproducts like phosphine gas that are odorless, colorless, and they can kill you in concentrations in 300 billions of a part per million, kind of very small concentrations. And it's a byproduct of the manufacturer. You have different methods, and they taught us about the phosphorus with matchsticks, and then the pseudoephedrine and the not pseudoephedrine method. So you learn the purpose of that was to teach us kind of what to look for from a first responder perspective if you saw certain things, together or whatever, to kind of be a little more cautious. But meth is a very dirty drug. It's a very bad drug, and it causes a lot of problems. So this guy had a history of it. He had used it. He had manufactured it. And he had been to prison for it. And so he gets another charge, and the basis for the charge was that some silly girl that he had come to his meth lab in this out-of-the-way area and county in Kentucky, she got stopped leaving his house, and first thing out of her mouth was, I'll tell you everything you want to know about this guy. He's making meth down the street, and I'll do whatever you want. And they hadn't even talked to her. They hadn't said, hey, what's your license registration? I mean, she was just volunteering all this information. But, you know, people do what they do, and you just got to move on from it. But she agreed to do some undercover buys and on video, and they got that. They got the video of the lab itself. And so it didn't work out for him. He was eventually arrested, and during the course of his criminal trial, there was a discovery process, as almost every criminal defendant has a right to. He was shown the information the state had against him, and people in that jail in Southern Kentucky, they kind of hyped him up and got him to kind of fight the charges. And they said, look, you have all these things against you. You have a history of it. You have Kentucky's version of habitual offender. It's called persistent felony offender. We're going to charge you with that. They had the actual things they seized when they did the raid that warranted his arrest. They said, take all of these things and forget it, and we'll give you 10 years in prison if you sign today. And he didn't. And so now he's sitting in prison with about a 60-year sentence and trying to fight it. And it's probably not going to work. I don't wish bad on anyone. Did he manufacture meth and cause a public health issue? Certainly. But it's basically a life sentence for this guy. He's an older guy. But, you know, I don't know. So he was a very nice guy. He was very smart about what he was doing. That's the thing you're going to find, is there are people that are in prison that they're not dumb. They just got caught. And that's the thing, is that a lot of people that break the law and commit crimes and go to prison and get caught, that's the only difference between them. And I don't know, maybe it's kind of a cynical way to look at things and look at people in society. But I think that just because you've been to jail or prison doesn't mean that you're necessarily a bad person. There are plenty of people that are great people that have had some blemishes on their marks, whether it's they cheated once in school or they got arrested or whatever. And there's people that have never been arrested that are horrible people that do horrible things that have never gotten caught for it. So it's my feeling. I'm obviously very biased, but you know, the first night that I actually went to prison, the first real prison, I guess, state permanent facility that I was at, the cellmate that I had, he was colorful. I'll say that. The short story is that he killed someone, and so he was in prison for a pretty long stretch of time, about 18 years that he was going to have to do consecutively. You know, not any chance of getting out, so at least 18 years. And he did something that maybe warranted that. You know, I wasn't there. I wasn't in his position. The state found that, yeah, he did something that warranted this time and all that. But at any rate, the story that he told me, and this is the first night that we were, I want to preface this is the first night that we were in the cell together, because you're in an open dorm in a jail, that's one environment, but you're in a closed 2-person cell and the door closes at night, that's a little bit different. So the thought at the time and the place that I was at is, you definitely want to know if you have someone, you know, in the cell with you that has a sex offense, whether it's rape or a child molestation or something like that, because maybe they need to find somewhere else to go. And it isn't really up to you to decide, or isn't really up to you to find them a place to go. Just you don't want them around you. And that's a pretty universal concept in prison, is that sex offenders are not treated with any kind of respect at all. They get, I'm not going to say victimized, but they get other crimes, perpetrated against them while they're in prison. They're subject of extortions, they're subject of assaults, and some people look at that different ways. Not really for me to judge. You know, I don't like it. I don't like what they've done or what they're accused of doing, or what they're convicted of doing. But it's not for me to judge. They've been judged. I don't want them around me, but I'm not going to judge them either. So went through and showed each other our timesheets, said I'm in here for this, explained the situation, talked a little more about our upbringing, where we came from, what we did, what we wanted to do when we got out. His situation was different because he's got 18 years before he ever sees the parole board. And then, he told me the story of what happened. And he said that he was sitting at his mother's dinner table, actually. And there was a disagreement. A gun was pulled out by a third person. It was him and his mother and this third person. Third person pulled a gun out. the guy that I was in the cell with that night, he pulled his gun out, shot the guy in the head. And that's, that, I mean, you could almost understand that. I think the average person has the capacity to at least kind of, okay, well, someone pulls a gun out and points it at my mother, I'm probably going to shoot them if I can. They're in my house, our house, whatever. Then yeah, you have a right to defend yourself. There's some other facts that he left out, and that happens. But, so he had a thought in his mind at the time that, in the way he phrased it, I'm just going to tell exactly the way he phrased it to me. He said, I've never had brain before. And this is probably the only chance that I'm going to have to ever have it. And he said he did. He tried some of this guy's brains because at this point, the skull is a very temperamental part of the body. It doesn't really tolerate too much movement and expansion and those kinds of things that a bullet causes. And so he tried part of this guy's brain. And then he said, all right, good night. See you in the morning. So I was like, okay. I can't say I slept with one eye open, but I didn't sleep very good that night. So the longer I stayed there at that facility, that prison, the more I got to know him. I still, I don't like the guy, but he did what he did. He's serving his time for it. Someone's dead. They can never be brought back. So, but that was the first cellmate that I had in prison, the first night that I was ever in prison. So I had another guy that I met at the same prison that was at his girlfriend's house that him and her shared together. There was a big party that he had. There was drugs and alcohol and stuff everywhere. Individual that he really didn't like before the party came over. They had an argument earlier in the night. They had kind of separated and kind of moved on from it. He goes to the bedroom where his girlfriend is, and he comes into the bedroom and where their bedroom was and sees this guy that he had the argument with earlier in the middle of raping his girlfriend. He pulled out his gun, shot him in the head, and killed him instantly. Everyone's freaking out. They're going kind of nuts about what just happened. They're coming in there and looking at what happened. The girlfriend's obviously freaking out because that's a pretty traumatic situation to see. And then the other thing that she had going on before, this guy's head went flying everywhere. This guy tells me that after that happened, he went outside and smoked a cigarette and took a bottle of whiskey with him and put the gun on the ground away from him, called the police, said, I just shot so-and-so. Can y'all come and get him or arrest me or whatever y'all are going to do? Dispatcher told him some things to do as far as with the gun so that he wouldn't get shot by the police that were responding. But they show up. He surrenders peacefully. He gets arrested. Kentucky had changed their self-defense laws sometime immediately before this incident happened. And he was talking about it to me one day, and he said, if I'd have been sober, I never would have gotten charged. He probably would have gotten a parade through town. But because he was intoxicated, that kind of changed some things. And also because the person that he had killed was someone to someone else that was more important to him in that town that he lived in. So, he ended up doing about 11 years in prison, and he was released. So as far as I know, he's doing okay. But you have these different people that you encounter, and they can be people that eat a brain. I hate to laugh at that. It's not funny, but it's such a macabre scenario to imagine. But you have to think that someone's mind literally snapped. That's what I can think of, is that someone who does that, something snapped in their mind. They weren't. I don't know. But then you've got someone that is having a party, and they do something that, had they not been intoxicated, they would have not ever been charged under the laws of the state here. But because he was intoxicated, and everybody was intoxicated, then he got charged, and he went to prison. The girl that that he was involved with, time left him. And that's really not surprising considering the facts and the circumstances that happened. That's the people go to prison and they get forgotten about. And not to say that relationship really could have worked, or maybe it could have. But the situation was just too traumatic and too serious to kind of warrant, I guess, continuation of relationship. So met a lot of people that were just, they were very interesting. And I'll try to talk more about that. And it's not to glorify crime or criminality or anything. It's just, if you're out there and you're watching this video and you're thinking that you're going to have a reunion in prison with your friends, they don't segregate you. So if you come from a certain neighborhood or a certain area, wherever that may be, you're not going to stay. Kentucky is not a state anyway. And, a lot of states may do things different, but you're not going to stay with the people that you associate or identify with the most, maybe. You're going to be forced to kind of interact with everybody, and everybody's crimes are not agreeable to everyone else. So it may mean that you're in the cell with a sex offender. The point is, the best way to prevent any of these things from happening and having to have, a cellmate that did either one of those things, or worse, or more, is to just not break the law. I can't emphasize that enough. That's the whole point of this channel, and what I'm trying to talk about, and to get people to understand. A lot of times you don't think about consequences when you have your actions, or someone I was talking to tonight. It kind of has a flaccid attitude about drinking and driving. One of the guys that I was locked up with, he was an alcoholic. He had a drinking problem for years before anything happened. And then he's drinking and driving one day like he had numerous times before. And his uncle was in the car with him, and he had a wreck, killed his uncle. So when it came time to his sentencing hearing and to his other hearings that happened, and the arraignment and everything else, he had people in his family that were for and against him. So it tore his family apart. And he's had some issues since he's been out, and I hope he's doing a lot better than the last time I talked to him. But there's another guy that I know that's doing great, that has totally, he seems to be doing really happy, really good. And that's good to hear. He's been able to continue something he did before. He works with dogs, and he loves it. He loves dogs. He's got his family back, and, they see me doing really good. So, yeah, I just wanted to share some personalities that I encountered during my time, and I may share some more later on, depending on how this video is received, I guess. There may be some PG-13 or other material in here, but that's the nature of what you see in prison. So the way to prevent having to go through that or see that or hear about that is to just not go, and that's always an option. So think before you act, and don't break the law. The laws are not for breaking. So be safe, take care of each other. Bye.